Now I'm about to talk to you about the inconvenient truth, a very controversial subject, the legalization of gay marriages. What do you think about it as a Christian? I'm not talking to unbelievers. They have their own ways. But you as a believer, according to the Bible, what do you think is the right thing? According to my opinion and my perspective of what the Bible says, the Bible emphatically tells us that God hates homosexuality, lesbian, and those gay stuff. God hates it. It's an abomination before him. It is detestable before him. In fact, God did not make Adam to marry Albert. Adam was not supposed to be marrying Albert. Neither did God create Eve to marry Evelyn. It doesn't work that way. God created man and a woman to come together. God did not say a man could marry a man and lie with the man or have sexual relationship with them, or a woman can marry a woman and have sexual relationship with each other. It is an abomination. It is detestable before God. Homosexuality, gay, lesbian is a sin. It is sinful, and it's something God hates. That doesn't mean that it is a special sin. No, it is as equal sinful as unforgiveness. It is equally sinful like jealousy. It's equally sinful like stealing or pride. It is sinful. Just as God tells us not to sin in either ways. Idolatry, homosexuality, gays, lesbian is equally sinful. And so I'm not trying to say they are sinners and I am righteous. I want it to be plain that homosexuality, gay, lesbian is sinful, just as stealing, killing, murder, adultery, jealousy, pride, unforgiveness, hatred, bitterness, gossip is also sinful. So we have to make it plain that homosexuality is a sin. Today, the legalization of homosexuality is taking place in almost 7 states now. New York have legalized gay marriage. In 2011, they legalized the gay marriage. Massachusetts, in 2004, legalized gay marriage. They were the first state to legalize gay marriage. Connecticut, 2008, legalized gay marriage. Iowa, 2009, legalized gay marriage. New Hampshire, 2010, legalized gay marriage. Vermont, 2001, legalized gay marriage. DC, this year, 2012, they have also legalized gay and gay marriage. What is happening? The nation is being desecrated. Sin is increasing.
Joining us now, Senior Pastor at Hope Christian Church, Bishop Harry Jackson. Bishop Jackson, welcome. I want to start by asking you if this is a civil rights issue, because a lot of people have framed it that way. Why is it not analogous to civil rights in an earlier time period for minorities in the country?
Well, my father was threatened at gunpoint. He was working on voter registration. Policeman discharged a weapon over his head. And we fought for years back at the bus, separate water fountains, couldn't live in certain places, lynched, tortured, all of those things in great numbers. But I believe the civil rights, according to Walter Fauntleroy, who's one of the proponents of our D.C. Marriage bill here that we're working on, said that housing, education, salary, and also fair treatment in court is ultimately the essence of what civil rights is really all about.
Well, but Pastor, nobody's minimizing the earlier civil rights fights. They were historic. There's no question about that. But here they're saying, look, one of the fights in civil rights was, can black people and white people get married together? Even though they love each other, and people said they couldn't. And here it seems to be very, very similar. So I'm asking you, why don't you want to allow these people to have the same civil rights that you fought for earlier.
Well, I don't see that distinctive. You're changing marriage, which is an institution that we know has generational implications. I'm concerned about the next generation, the children. I'm also concerned about the fact that you're saying a father or a mother is not needed. And many blacks are outraged that the civil rights comparison is being made based on their pain, based on their problems, but also based on the fact that marriage, we're talking about now, fundamentally changing the equation, which is 5, 6, 10,000 years old. Who knows how old civilization is? But that's the essence of the argument that I and others like me make.
All right, Bishop Jackson, do you think homosexuality is a matter of choice?
I believe for many people it really is a matter of choice. And I have ex-gays in our church, people who've come out of the lifestyle, who want to get married. It's an amazing thing. And so what we're dealing with now is how shall a relationship be defined, and should it be defined to the detriment of the broader institutions of education, training? Kids are going to be taught certain things in school.
But Bishop Jackson, if you think it's a matter of choice, and that's what separates it partly from the civil rights eras of the past, can you choose to be gay?
I think that many people do. As I just shared with you, some have chosen to come out of the gay lifestyle.
Can anybody choose? Can you choose? Can I choose? Can you say, wake up today and go, I'm going to put on jeans instead of pants, and I'm going to go with Steve instead of Susie?
I believe that why men and women are gay is a very complex process, and for many of them, they may feel like they are hardwired that way. And my issue is that the people have a right to vote. I don't really want to address homosexuality. I'm dealing with the fact that the majority of people in California said, let the people vote. They voted their right to vote, which is the fundamentals of all the civil rights movements in America, was taken away from them.
Bishop Jackson, I got to ask you, I'm sorry, we're running out of time. I got to ask you one last question. Look, they got loved ones. They really love them. And they, for example, they go in the hospital, they're sick, etc., and they can't get visitation rights. Do you get that? And if you do, if you feel that pain, what do you want them to do?
Well, I feel that pain in many areas that has already been alleviated through civil unions. And so I believe at this juncture, we need to make sure that individuals get all the rights America can afford, but we need the right of the people to vote, and we need to protect marriage, which I believe as an institution is on life support in America. The institution must be saved, and that's where I stand.
Bishop Jackson, we're going to wind up agreeing when all of the states wind up voting for gay marriage at some point. I'm sure you'll come back on the show and say that's awesome because of democracy.
Well, I hope that doesn't happen, but you're a great host. Thank you for the fair opportunity to get my points out.
Thank you so much. Bishop Harry Jackson.
Because that which is abominable and detestable before God is now being legalized. It is wrong. We have to even learn from animals. Goats, I've never seen goats, a male goat sleeping with another male goat. I've never seen a dog, a male dog sleeping with a male dog, or a female dog sleeping with a female dog. Even animals are becoming wiser than us humanity. It is time we pause and learn from them. When was the last time you saw a male goat or sheep lying with another male goat? So how come we human beings who should know better come to that place of stooping so low to come to that point? And today, when people are asked, even ministers on talk radio show, on TV, whether they know whether gay or lesbian is a sin, they are so ashamed to the extent that they cannot say that gay and lesbian is sinful. They cannot. They are too ashamed to say it because of people's opinion. And those who are able to declare that gay and lesbian is a sin, people begin to criticize them. People begin to criticize them. But I'm here to tell you that whether you like it or not, gay, lesbian is sinful and it shouldn't be encouraged, and it is not right for the country to be endorsing it. The Bible says,
tell my children as I tell them what I believe myself, and dealing with these social issues, whether it's abortion or gay marriage.
What do you believe?
I believe that marriage was defined by God a long time ago. Marriage is almost as old as dirt, and it was defined in the garden between Adam and Eve, one man, one woman, for life, till death do you part. So I would never attempt to try to redefine marriage, and I don't think anyone else should either. So do I support the idea of gay marriage? No, I don't.
Do you think homosexuality is a sin?
I think that it's unnatural. I think that it's detrimental and ultimately destructive to so many of the foundations of civilization.
So what do you do if one of your 6 kids says, "Dad, bad news, I'm gay"?
I'd sit down and I'd have a heart-to-heart with them, just like you would with your kids. I'd talk to them about...
If one of my sons said that, I'd say, "That's great, son, as long as you're happy." What would you say?
Well, I wouldn't say that's great, son, as long as you're happy. I'm going to say, you know, there's all sorts of issues that we need to wrestle through in our life, and just because you feel one way doesn't mean we should act on everything that we feel. But it's
and yet,
not only
some people would say that telling kids that being gay is a sin, or getting married is a sin, or whatever, that in itself is incredibly destructive and damaging in a country where 7 states now have legalized it.
Yes, but you have to also understand that you yourself are using a standard of morality to say that telling people such and such of a behavior is sinful. You're using a standard of morality to make that statement and say that that is terribly destructive. So everyone is going to have a standard against which they...
Listen, I'm not an American. I'm making the point that 7 states in America have now legalized gay marriage.
Well, Piers, you're speaking to a man who is a Christian, and I believe that all of us are sinful. I could stand at the top of the list and say that I need a Savior and I need an overhaul of the heart more than anyone. And so that's what I teach my kids. I teach them the values that I hold dear. I treasure the God that loves me and forgives me of my sin. And I would teach that to my children, as well as having a wonderful relationship with them that my wife and I work on every single day. So your value system, my value system, we're all going to pick a standard against which we judge behavior morally. All of our laws, ultimately at their core, are going to be based on a moral evaluation.
That righteousness exalts a nation, and sin is a reproach to any people. Because of the legalization of gay and lesbian marriages all over the country, it is going to cause the wrath of God to visit this nation speedily, just like Sodom and Gomorrah. If God does not judge this nation, then he has to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah. At the same time, I believe that gay and lesbian marriage should not be legalized. At the same time, it is bad in extreme cases where nations like Uganda go to the extreme and declare that if you are found to be a gay or a lesbian, you have to be put in life prison. They were almost about to pass a law which was prevented for that if you are a gay or a lesbian and you are caught, you'll be put in life in prison or you will be killed. I think that is to the extreme. I believe that gays and lesbians, even though it is not right and it's sinful, but they have the right to live.
We stand for human freedom, and we stand for human dignity, and we stand for ending discrimination.
The member of parliament who introduced the 2009 Anti-Homosexuality Act is a guy named David Bahati. If this bill were actually to become law in Uganda, consensual conduct would be subjected to life imprisonment with the possibility of the death penalty for certain homosexual acts. All Ugandans would be required to report any suspected homosexual to the police within 24 hours. It would criminalize any discussion, expression, any outreach to LGBT communities, including health-related outreach.
Now, the idea that in Uganda we have plans to kill gays, you know that the bill of Honorable Bahati is intended to kill homosexuals. That is a view which the entire world has got, yet it's not the case.
There is a clause, however, that does allow capital punishment for repeated acts of homosexuality.
Yes.
On January 26, 2011, outspoken LGBT activist David Kato was murdered in Uganda. He was beaten to death with a hammer in his home. Kato was a close friend and associate of Frank Mugisha.
They have the right to live their life, but we shouldn't legalize it as a whole for the nation to embrace it. That is wrong. That is wrong. At the same time, strict measures like putting people in prison and killing them because of their sexual orientation is also wrong. But the reason why the Uganda government was willing to do that is because some private companies from the United States and the Western world, I was watching the documentary, I have the documentary, were going to African nations like Uganda and going to schools, the boarding schools, and were giving things like laptops and cell phones to young guys and getting them into this sexual habits. They were enticing them into gays and lesbians. And so the government at that time wanted to strictly stop that kind of movement from going on. And therefore they were taking measures to prevent people from embracing. In Africa, for instance, things like gays and lesbians did not exist some years ago. You could be gay and a lesbian, but you can't allow anybody to even hear about. When I was in boarding school in Africa, it was like you dare not even let anybody know that you are gay or lesbian. It was never known. But today, the Western world is taking their filth into Africa. Even though we Africans have our own badge of problems already, the Western world is also taking this filthy spirit of gays and lesbians into Africa and going to schools and getting young guys with things like laptops and cell phones and getting them into these sexual orientations. And that's why the Uganda government was so strict into blocking people from even coming out to say we are a gay or a lesbian and want to get married. And that's why they went to the extreme. And the extreme they went was also bad in the sense that they were willing to put people who are gays and lesbians into life imprisonment or also kill them. I think that was also wrong. It is wrong. It is wrong. It is wrong. At the same time, I believe that gays and lesbians must be stopped and it shouldn't continue to increase. Right now, we have almost 7 or 8 states in the United States who have now legalized it. And I tell you the truth, it is going to allow the wrath of God to visit us speedily. That's why the war between Israel and Iran is very, very, very crucial, because as Americans engage into this warfare, we don't have the covering of God at this time, because we have turned our backs to God and we have turned our face from Him, and we are no more doing the right thing. Even we are taking in God we trust, we are taking the Bible, we are taking prayers, we are taking anything that represents Jesus, represent God from our institution, and now we are reduced to reprobate mind, doing our own things. And so just as great nations have fallen, the Babylonian Empire fell, just as the Persian Empire fell, just as the Greek Empire fell, just as the Roman Empire fell, the Egyptian Empire fell, Britain fell. That is the same way the United States is going to fall, because we have turned our backs to God and we are no more worshiping Him in truth and in spirit, and we are not doing the right thing. Today, the capital of the United States of America has legalized gay marriage, meaning that the very capital has already been hijacked by the principalities, and therefore chaos is about to visit this nation, because we have turned our backs to God. It is time for us to pray for mercy. And so today, when we are thinking about going to support Israel against Iran, what we don't know is that we are moving to our destruction. That's why people who have been reading prophecies tell us that the United States cannot be located in prophecy, because we are irrelevant. Even though we think we are the powers now, but very soon, the wrath of God will visit us very soon, because we have turned our backs to God and we are no more worshiping Him in truth and in spirit. Wake up, for Jesus is coming soon.
New report coming in saying that the U.S. thinks that Azerbaijan has recently granted Israel access to air bases along its border with Iran. If true, that means the Israelis could strike Iran's nuclear facilities without having to refuel, and that is a big change in Israel's military situation. John Bolton is the former U.S. ambassador to the UN and a Fox News contributor. Hello, Mr. Ambassador.
Hi, Allison. Glad to be here.
So if these new reports are correct, that Israel is now being granted access to Azerbaijan, what does this mean?
Well, I'd say two things. One, substantively, obviously Israel can do the math and the geography, and if it can get positions closer to Iran's nuclear targets to be able to attack them, that's so much the better from Israel's point of view. Israel knows how difficult preemptive military attack would be, and it's not surprising if these reports are true, and I'm not commenting one way or the other whether they are. But I think there's another point here beneath the substantive point, and that is that these reports come from American intelligence officials. Now, if you think back a month or so ago, Defense Secretary Panetta said publicly that he thought if Israel attacked Iran, it would be in the April, May, June period. And I think the reason he did that was that the Obama administration's private effort to pressure Israel not to attack Iran were failing, and they had decided to go public. I think this leak today is part of the administration's campaign against an Israeli attack.
Yeah, in fact, you're not alone. There are reports today in Israel News that, in fact, the U.S. is leaking this classified information in order to dissuade Israel. So why is the U.S. doing that?
I think the Obama administration has long believed that an Israeli attack was worse than an Iranian nuclear weapon. The president says that containment and deterrence of Iran is not his policy, and I think today that's true. But it's his plan B. It's his backup plan when his current efforts at sanctions fail and diplomacy fails and Iran gets nuclear weapons. And I think that the pressure that the administration has put on Israel has been just merciless behind the scenes. But nonetheless, as I say, every evidence is that the pressure's failing, that the Israeli government will do what they think is necessary. So the Obama administration has torqued it up a notch, and now they're going to reveal very sensitive, very important information that will allow Iran to defeat an Israeli attack. I think that's what's going on.
So if Israel does take advantage of these Azerbaijani airstrips or places that they can launch from, what does that mean for the U.S.?
Well, I'm not saying I have any knowledge about anything in Azerbaijan, but what it means is that the likelihood of an Israeli attack would be more successful because the distances are shorter. They can have their planes over the target for longer periods of time. They have to worry less about aerial refueling. There are a whole host of reasons why being able to attack from closer in positions makes sense. So releasing this information so that the Iranians now know about it takes away a potentially very powerful mode of attack that hitherto the Israelis had been able to keep secret.
Former Ambassador John Bolton, thanks so much for your expertise.
Listen to me, precious people.
Nisikizeni watu wa dhamani.
The Israel-Iran war
Vita vya Israeli na Irani
that is going to take place
vinavyokwenda kutendeka
will be so severe
vitakuwa vikali sana
that there will be a hit back.
Ya kwamba kutakuwepo na kulipiza.
Where Iran hits back.
Ambapo sasa Irani italipiza.
And it's going to be a flare up.
Na itakuwa kuwaka kukuu sana.
And it will be led by Russia.
Na vitaongozwa na Urusi.
As you can see today.
Kama vile mweza kuona leo.
In the news I am going to read for you here.
Katika habari inaenda kuwasomeeni hapa.
How Russia wants.
Jinsi ambavyo Urusi inaonya.
Russia wants Israel and United States.
Urusi inawaonya Israeli na Umoja wa Majimbo ya Marekani
from attacking Iran.
Kwamba wasije wakavamia Iran.
So you begin to see the central role of Russia.
Kwa hivyo waanza kuona sehemu ya ukatikati ya Urusi
in this war.
Katika vita hivi.
Even the nuclear plants in Iran.
Hata vile vituo vya nyuklia kule Iran.
They have been built by Russia.
Vimejengwa na Urusi.
I want to read for you a lot of news reportage here from Haaretz newspaper, which is an Israeli newspaper.
Nataka kuwasomeni ripoti nyingi za habari hapa toka katika gazeti la Kiisraeli linaitwa Haaretz.
But when this war takes place,
lakini wakati vita hivi vitatendeka,
it will be so severe,
vitakuwa vikali mno,
to cause Israel to sign a peace treaty for 7 years.
Vitasababisha Israeli kusahihisha makubaliano ya amani kwa miaka 7.
A false peace treaty.
Na yatakuwa makabiliano ya uongo ya amani.
And that means when this war takes place,
na hiyo inamaanisha kwamba wakati vita hivi vitatendeka,
it happens at the time when the rapture is here.
vitatendeka wakati ambapo unyakuzi uko hapa.
Because
Kwa sababu
when it takes place,
vitakapotendeka,
Israel is compelled to sign a 7-year peace treaty, a false one.
Israeli italazimika iingie katika makubaliano ya amani ya uongo
with the Arab states and Russia,
na mataifa ya Kiarabu na Urusi,
the enemies of God.
na maadui wa Mungu.
That is the tribulation.
Na hiyo ndio dhiki.
The rapture has happened.
Unyakuzi umetendeka.
Shalom.
Shalom.
In our last hour, we learned that the White House is moving ahead with new sanctions on Iranian oil to punish Tehran for its nuclear program. The president deciding that there is enough crude oil on the world markets to take this step without harming the U.S. or its allies. But this comes after explosive accusations that the White House leaked classified information to stop Israel from attacking Iran. Yesterday on our show, former Ambassador John Bolton called out the administration after reports surfaced that Israel had been granted access to airfields in Azerbaijan, that's along Iran's northern border. Let's listen.
I think that the pressure that the administration has put on Israel has been just merciless behind the scenes. But nonetheless, as I say, every evidence is that the pressure's failing, that the Israeli government will do what they think is necessary. So the Obama administration has torqued it up a notch, and now they're going to reveal very sensitive, very important information that will allow Iran to defeat an Israeli attack. I think that's what's going on.
So does this jeopardize our relationship with Israel? Let's ask Fox News national security analyst KT McFarland. KT, great to see you.
Good to be with you.
Do you agree with Ambassador Bolton and what he said yesterday that the U.S. is intentionally leaking this classified information to undermine Israel and get it to stop whatever plans it has to attack Iran?
Well, the administration doesn't want any kind of a problem in the Middle East before the election. They don't want an Israeli attack on Iranian sites because they think it'll lead to a regional war, draw the United States in. They don't want that kind of a situation because they think it'll lead to high oil prices, high gasoline prices. The way I think about it right now is it's like a foot race where everybody's racing. You've got Iran racing to get to the finish line of getting nukes as fast as they can. You have Israel racing to stop Iran from making those nukes. And you have the United States racing to stop Israel from stopping Iran.
I mean, of course the U.S. doesn't want to be drawn into another war.
Nobody wants
another war. That's
Even Israel
practical.
doesn't want another
Of course.
war.
I mean, that's logical. Is there any way for Iran to take whatever action it feels necessary without the U.S. getting dragged into something?
Well, the question is it one of time? How much time does everybody have left? And I've got to tell you, the people who know aren't talking, and the people who are talking probably don't know. The question is, does Iran get to that finish line before the election? Does Israel realize that it only has a certain amount of time, so it's got to have some preemptive attack? Or, as President Obama is saying today, do we let sanctions work? There's enough time. Those sanctions are somehow going to get the Iranians to go to the negotiating table and give up their nukes. However, they have not up until this point.
But what about this other question of the U.S. possibly leaking classified information and compromising Israel if, in fact, nobody knew that there were air bases at Azerbaijan that were going to be made available? What does this do to the relationship with Israel?
I think the bigger problem this week was not so much the leaking of information about the Azerbaijan airfields that Israel might or might not use. You know, look, Israel's trying to hedge all of its bets. It's looking for friends. It's looking for military capabilities. It's looking for sabotaging the Iranian program. It's looking for assassinating potential Iranian scientists involved in that program. But to me, the bigger problem was that open mic. When President Obama leaned over to the Russian leader and said, don't worry, after the election I'll have more flexibility. Now, these are the same Russian leaders who have just spent 6 months trashing the United States in their election campaign. If you're the country of Israel and you're the Prime Minister of Israel and you're listening to that and you're hearing an American president saying, once I'm reelected, there'll be a different deal, you've got to wonder, hey, this is the guy who just said, I've got your back. Don't worry, we're not going to let Iran get nuclear weapons. You've got to wonder that after Obama is reelected, if he is, can Israel count on his word?
I see, because it makes it seem as though the president is disingenuous.
To everybody. You have to wonder, where's the truth here? And if Obama's saying to Israel, wait till after the election, whatever you do, wait till after the election, you got to wonder if after the election, is he still your friend?
Let's talk about what he announced today in terms of the sanctions on these foreign financial institutions institutions that do business with Iran. What impact will that have, do you think?
There are a couple of things going on with these sanctions. We've had sanctions for years with Iran. They haven't stopped Iran's behavior. We're now into a new phase of sanctions, and these are basically targeting the Iranian banking system. And it's like think of it as putting like a great big embargo around Iranian oil, but you're using banks instead of battleships. What's the objective? What are you trying to do with these sanctions? Well, one idea, the administration says that the Iranians will realize that they've got to go to the negotiating table and negotiate away their nukes. I think that's naive. The closer Iran gets to those nukes, they're going to race to that finish. The other objective might be to say to the Iranians, to the Iranian people, things are so bad. You should go out into the streets again, topple your regime the way the Egyptians did, the way the Syrians are trying to do, the way the Libyans have done, the way the Moroccans have done, and then maybe Iran under different leadership has a different plan.
Well, yes, except that Iran tried that. The Iranians tried that, and we didn't necessarily have their backs.
Totally. We snuffed them. I mean, that was, in fact, I think, the beginning of the Arab Spring when the Iranian people went to the streets in 2009. The question will be now for this administration, if the Iranian people go to the streets again, and I'm not saying they will, but if they were, would this president then welcome them the same way that he welcomed the Egyptians who went to the streets?
So do you think that's the answer? To foment an uprising there?
They're lousy options. We either bomb Iran, let Iran get the bomb. Those are two losers. What is a regional war? What is a nuclear Iran? Is there a third option? Is there an option C? I think it's a long shot, but I would go for option C, try to crash their economy using the oil weapon.
All right, KT McFarland, thanks so much. Always great to have your expertise.
Nobody knows the day or the hour of the coming of the Messiah. He will come like a thief. But what the Lord has displayed here very clearly is that this war is related to the coming of the Messiah. It may be that when this war takes place sharp like this, then it takes 3-4 months or 1 year, and Israel signs the 7-year deal, peace deal.
Alafu Israeli itaeka sahihi yale makubaliano ya amani ya miaka 7.
After 3 years, 1 year, 3 days, who knows?
Baada ya miaka 3, mwaka 1, siku 3, nani ajuae?
So nobody can say that when that war takes place, the rapture happens the same day.
Basi hakuna mtu awezaye kusema kwamba wakati vita hivyo vitatendeka, unyakuzi unatendeka siku hiyo hiyo.
Today here,
leo hapa,
as I was playing for you the clips,
nilipokuwa nikiwachezea hizo awamu,
the reportage on this war,
ripoti juu ya vita hivi,
the Lord stole me into a trance.
Bwana aliniiba katika usingizi kidogo.
And I saw a lot of Israeli aircrafts on the runway.
Na nikaona ndege nyingi za Kiisraeli pale kwa runway,
at high speed taking off.
Zikiwa kwenye kasi ya juu kabisa zinaanza safari.
And I heard the voice saying,
na nikasikia sauti ikasema,
look, this war has broken out.
Tazama, hivi vita vimelipuka.
And there is a follow-up vision most recently,
na kuna maono ya kufuatilia hivi majuzi kabisa,
when the Lord again showed me the aircrafts.
Wakati mara tena Bwana alinionyesha ndege.
And by voice he said,
na kwa sauti akasema,
look, the war has broken out.
Tazama, vita vimelipuka.
The war has broken out.
Vita vimelipuka.
So this war is related to the coming of the Messiah.
Na kwa hivyo vita hivi vinaambatana na kuja kwake Masia.
While nobody may know the day or the hour,
wakati hakuna mtu anaweza kujua siku wala saa,
the rapture could happen right before the war.
Unyakuzi pia waweza kutendeka kabla ya hivyo vita.
Such that when the war takes place, then they announce one peace deal right away there and then.
Kiasi ya kwamba wakati vita vile vitatendeka, mara moja wanatangaza ule mkubaliano wa amani papo hapo.
Or
ama
the rapture could happen after this war.
Unyakuzi pia waweza kutendeka baada ya hivi vita.
But the most important thing,
lakini jambo la muhimu sana,
the most important message that today's news,
ujumbe wa muhimu zaidi ambao habari za leo
screams out to the church,
zinatokeza kwa kanisa,
is that time is over.
Ni kwamba wakati umekwisha.
I am reading a newspaper. How you know it for yourself?
Sasa unajijulia mwenyewe.
that war
kwamba hivyo vita
has a lot to do with the coming of the Messiah.
vina mengi sana kuhusiana na kuja kwake Masia.
That war
Hilo vita
has so much to do with the rapture of the church.
vina mengi kabisa kuambatana na unyakuzi wa kanisa.
What I've shared tonight
Kile ambacho nimeshiriki usiku wa leo
is not for laughing.
si vya kuchekea.
Is not laughable.
Na si vya kucheka.
Is not to be taken lightly.
Wala si vya kuchukuliwa kirahisi.
This
haya
touches on the very eternity of people.
Yanagusia kwa umilele wa watu.
Nobody can ever smile at this.
Hakuna mtu anayeweza kutabasamu kwa haya.
Because today,
manake leo,
I have been surprised
nimeshtuliwa
that among the prophecies I've ever given across the earth,
ya kwamba miongoni mwa unabii ambao nimewahi kupeana kote kote duniani,
this prophecy of the nuclear war coming to Iran,
huu unabii wa vita vya nyuklia vijavyo Irani,
is the one I have brought extensively across the entire face of the earth and severally.
Ndivyo ambavyo nimetabiri kote kote kwa urefu na upana katika pembe zote za dunia, tena mara kwa mara.
And we know it, precious people,
na twayajua watu wa dhamani,
that it is said
kwamba inasemwa hivi,
that end time Bible prophecy
ya kwamba unabii wa Biblia wa nyakati za mwisho
that touches on the church
unaogusia kanisa
and the coming of the Messiah
na kuja kwake Masia
gravitates
unazunguka
around the state of Israel.
Unazunguka taifa la Israeli.
And today we have seen it here.
Na leo tumeiona hapa
that Israel is sitting at the center of biblical prophecy.
Ya kwamba Israeli imeketi katikati mwa unabii wa Biblia.
But I want to say one thing.
Lakini nataka kusema jambo moja.
That may the Lord bless you.
Kwamba Bwana na awabariki.
May the Lord open your eyes.
Drank a lot and partied a lot, and I was moved to Tucson, Arizona, and I was working at a construction site, and one of the guys brought some water from Mexico that was contaminated, and I ended up drinking it by accident. Got real sick, contracted cholera, and within about 72 hours I was flat on my back and basically dehydrated. That's when I passed away. I noticed that when I passed on, that of course I wear glasses and I'm very nearsighted. I noticed that, first thing I noticed is that I wasn't wearing my glasses. I could see clearly across the room. And when I turned my head, I noticed that my body wasn't moving. And I was lifted right out of my body and hovered over my body, looking down at myself and looking around. And next thing I knew, I went through the ceiling of the room I was in, and I was transported into a very, very, very black, dark void. I could hear like somebody speaking to me, like telepathy, and it was explaining to me many, many things that I no longer remember, but most of the idea was explaining to you the whys of life. Why there was evil in the world, why this, why, people have questions all the time. These were being answered to you as you were being transported to this light. And time you got to where the light was, you knew what happened, you know what's going on, you know what happened, you know you died, you know you're going to be judged, and everything as you're traveling, it's made so clear to you that what's happening is perfectly just and right. Oh yeah, I was going through the darkness and was approaching the light there. Roaring and roaring and spinning and spinning and spinning. And it looked like the sky, and I hit the ground. It kind of hurt, and I stood up, and I looked, and I go, where am I? All these people ran out, and some of them looked like people that were dead that I knew, and other people I knew that were not dead. And they come around me, slapping me on the back. They got there awful quick because the house looked far away, but all of a sudden they were there, slapping me on the back, welcoming me there. but something just wasn't quite right with them because they looked weird. They had yellow glints in their eye, and their eyes were almost reptile-like. I looked over and I saw what looked like my best friend turn into somebody else. And I said, hey, wait a minute, you can't do that. You're not who you say you are. Who are you? And then all of a sudden I looked around and I go, all these people around me are not people. They began to morph into what they were. They were ugliest creatures I've ever seen. Kind of like some of them, they're just god-awful, like rotting vegetables, and they're distorted and twisted, and they were not perfect by no means, and they're just filthy, smelly creatures, and they were just starting to come at me like they're going to shred me to pieces. And one tried to grab me right across my chest, and one tried to grab my legs, and while they're trying to tear you to pieces, they backed away, and this one that looked like my best friend earlier, who morphed into different people, came up to me. It was about 4'8", looked like a sort of half dinosaur, a reptilian type creature, and it was hissing and spitting at me, and was speaking in a language that I didn't know what it was saying at first. I was telling, and it was broken in English, it was telling me to come, follow it, follow it, follow it. So he motioned to me, and we took a few steps, and all of a sudden we were at the end of the horizon. That doesn't make any sense, but we came across to what looked like the end of the horizon. He couldn't go any further, and I couldn't understand what it was. And yet I could look out, and I could see all this vast fields and mountains. And then that creature stuck its hand in this horizon, and he ripped it open like a veil, and he stepped out of it up onto this road, and he telling me to come, motioning me to come, so I did the same. I just went ahead, I got up, and next thing I knew, I was on a large, wide, dusty, flat road. I just came out of a cell, a cube. It was around 10 by 10 foot square. It could have been 14 by 14. So that's what the dimensions were. And there was a cell next to it, and there was a cells above it, kind of set back, concave, so they're going up. And there were 6 of them to the roof of this place. And in the walls are embedded peoples in cells. And we pointed to another cube, and in this cube I was looking at there were people inside these cubes. Some were vacant, some people were waiting for people to arrive like I did. There's this person in there, and I was just looking at them, and then it was showing me another person. Each person that was in their cube was like they were reliving parts of their life all over again, but not in a very pleasant way. It's like a living nightmare. This one vortex was spinning, and a lady that just died in a car wreck came through, and she was deposited right there. And I saw her as she arrived, and inside her cube, she saw it as the illusion of her grandmother's farm, her grandparents' farm that she loved so well as when she was growing up. And her grandmother recently passed away too, so she got in this cube, and immediately she thought she was in heaven because there was her grandmother waiting there welcoming her. The grandmother that was actually a demon that gave the illusion of being the grandmother said, "Dear Pudding, you made it to heaven. I'm so glad you're here." And she really thought that she was in paradise. But there was a darker side to her. She would make her children be what she wanted. Her children wanted something else. She wanted them to be this. And if they didn't do it her way, it was the fist. It was verbal abuse. It was cutting down. So as she sat down, I was watching it, and the tree's limbs just grabbed her. And then she realized she was not in paradise. And as we passed some cubes, there were people inside, and they were trapped in flames. And it was like their skin was still intact, but they were burning. And there was an individual, and he was playing pool. And this guy was a child serial killer, but he lived in the 1940s. But he was in this pool hall playing this pool before the punishments would commence again. He thought he had a break. And then these people in there would torment him and come and run and just grab him and tear him up. And out of the sky, I could see this big demon coming down. It reminded me of a snake. He just gobbled him and swallowed him. Then all the other little demons came up and said, that's no fair. We didn't have our chance with him yet. After he regurgitated him back up, he goes, oh, I know this sounds really bizarre, but that's what happened. Then all the other little demons, little teeny things, about 1 foot, 3 foot tall, just jumped on him. And he was powerless. And they were beating and clawing, and there was no rest for this guy whatsoever after that. It was constant torment. Everything that he ever done was being justly put back to him. Came to a cube, I was looking at this, and this was a woman. She was dressed in fine garb. She was a temple prostitute, basically what it was. And she was somebody who died in Corinth around 69 AD. For a price, she would have a newborn son. For some reason, their religion was some strange thing. When you have a newborn son, you can offer it into a statue, and there's flames underneath the statue. You put the baby on the statue, and basically the baby would be cooked. And here she is in this temple. There was no let up to her torment. It was almost like all the little babies that she burned that were hers and other people's were tormenting her, mocking her, pouncing on her, just crawling and tearing her up. And she just screamed, and I had to turn away and walk. There's an individual that she practiced the black dark craft. She was a witch. I just knew that she was a witch, but she died many hundreds of years ago. But she was trapped in a coffin, scratching, trying to get out. She couldn't get out. She was in that position for years and years and years and years, hundreds of years. And then finally, when she got it open, all the demons would pounce on her. And I walked on to another cube. We looked in this other cube on this row, and there was another lady, and she believed that Mother Earth could save her, and that if she honored the trees and the rocks, and she was into this nature thing, and part of their religious practice that she would practice would be getting out in the fields and dancing around a fire with a bunch of other people doing the same. The people that she thought that she was with were actually demons, and they would come up to her and say, you did this. They pick up a stone. You say, the stone will save you here, and they smacked her with it. So she was standing there, and the demons reached down there and reached in her mouth, ripped out her tongue, and part of her thing says, you talk bad? Oh, the stones are not going to save you. Nobody can save you. Then they ripped off her, just actually took her skin and just peeled it off. It was really slow and agonizing to shreds. It done nothing to the skeletons. Then they took the bones and broke the bones. And she felt everything. And then her body would come back together. The flesh would come back together. And she'd be whole again. And it would start all over again. A different scene would happen. And some of the cruelest people on earth were in these. Some people, I don't like to say names of people or anything like that, but I will, this one particular individual is definitely there, and everybody knows who it is. It's Adolf Hitler. Hitler was sitting in a cube. It was open, and it was just burning flames. He's just sitting there burning. And his flesh wasn't burning, and he had this hideous look on his face. And as he was burning, the flesh would be rotting, and he was feeling every bit of it. He's just sitting there burning. And his flesh wasn't burning, and he had this hideous look on his face. And as he was burning, the flesh would be rotting, and he was feeling every bit of it. It was almost like every oven of the gas, of the concentration camps, all the tortures that went on there were being meted back to him in one intense flaming bit of stoked up white hot heat that would rot his flesh away at the same time, make him ashes, come back. He was just being tormented like that. He was just, I remember having a weird look on his eyes. It was just angry, vicious anger.